Amen. Thank you, Ed. This is something I can't do from up there, especially in the summer when we're all sort of scattered and everybody's there someplace. Let me tell you a little bit about this passage and the setting we're in, because I gave you that sort of confusing introduction to John's Gospel. John is not concerned with the chronology of when things happen. John's concerned with the theological reason for them, the impact. And so John changes the chronology that we see in Matthew and in Luke and in Mark because he wants to make a statement. And part of what he's talking to us here is about the meaning of the feeding of the 5,000, because it's not about food. It's not about meeting the hunger of the people that come. It's about what happens. John always talks on more than one level. How many of you remember those old Bill Cosby records? Yeah, a couple of you are willing to date yourself and raise your hands, I can tell that. Bill Cosby used to always say, now I told you that story so I can tell you this one. That's what John does when he tells a story, because his stuff always has more than one meaning. The story here is about the feeding of the 5,000, but John's the one who puts it right at the time of the Passover, which means the meaning of this is that this is a Eucharistic meal. This is the communion. This is the Last Supper in John. This is the time when the community is created. This is about relationships. John's gospel is all about relationships, us to each other, and about our relationship to God and how that's lived out in our lives. So what happens here is that, as you notice, he goes to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, away from Capernaum, Jerusalem, from all of that stuff. And the people follow him. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not sure how he went across the Sea of Galilee. He must have gone around it, because it's pretty deep and it's wide enough that they didn't just sort of walk around the edge of the pond. But that's the way the story reads. But all these people follow him, and as he sits with his disciples, notice he's not there to teach. He's not teaching and healing. He went up to sit down on the hillside with his followers, and everybody showed up. And then he says to Philip, so how are we going to feed these people? And of course, Philip, being the good churchman that he is, we'll put him in that category, does the usual things. Well, Lord, here are the laundry list of reasons why it can't work. We don't have enough resources. It would take 6 months, money to do this. You know how that works. There's not enough money in the coffers. The roof leaks. We got to fix that first. We've heard that line around here. List all the reasons why we've talked about things that we believe God calls us to do, and we've backed off because we couldn't afford it. There weren't enough people. We can't do that because we don't have enough people to do the project. We don't have enough volunteers. We don't have enough of anything. Remember what Paul's saying in the Ephesians. To him who by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than we can ask or imagine. I mean, you think about what it means when we as God's children come together believing in the God who created everything, who can do anything, and then we turn around to God and we say, Lord, I'm sorry, but there's not enough stuff to do it. What's this thing about faith and belief? I mean, what happens here? That's what's going on with John. In John's gospel is that the disciples who are with Jesus are still in that mode of this is what we can accomplish. This is what we can do with what we've got in our pockets and our abilities. And in the middle of all that, suddenly there's this child that says, I have 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Now, I know that children, especially boys, are like bottomless pits, and they'll eat anything you put within reach. But I can imagine that if his family sent him out with a lunch, it wasn't weren't pound-and-a-half Wonder Bread loaves. These were biscuits and probably a couple of sardines. There wasn't a lot of food to go around to give him huge lunches, so he didn't come with a backpack. He came with a little paper bag. But what he had in the way of resources, he came and offered. I mean, imagine what that means. It's not going to be enough. We know it's not going to be sufficient, but Lord, everything I have, take it. And of course, Andrew says, but, that's not enough. And Jesus says, well, just give me what you've got, and it will be sufficient.